to the League of Women Voters Richfield 2020 Legislative Candidate Forum. My name is Susan Rosenberg, President of the League of Women Voters Richfield. Sue Sandel is the moderator, and Karen Jenkins is the timekeeper. I'm so pleased to have you all here with us. Our forum is now coming to you via a platform due to the pandemic. It is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Richfield City's local television station 16 at scheduled times and also on YouTube. The schedule and links will be provided via social media and to each candidate so they can be viewed at any time. The League of Women Voters Richfield is a nonpartisan, political, nonprofit organization that strives to protect citizens' voting rights and deliver unbiased education to voters. The League of Women Voters does not endorse candidates for office or political parties. Candidate forums for elections are part of the League of Women Voters Richfield 100-year tradition of helping voters obtain information about candidates' stands on the issues. As League of Women Voters Richfield works to grow the vote, protect the vote, and empower the vote, the candidate participation policy plays a vital role in our efforts to protect the vote and empower voters. All candidates were invited to participate. It is the candidate's option whether or not to appear. However, no substitutes or stand-ins would be allowed. If a candidate cannot attend, they could submit a written statement to be read by the moderator equal in length to the opening statements of the candidates present. The candidates will have an opportunity to make opening and closing statements and express their positions on issues in response to questions from the League of Women Voters Richfield, as well as questions from the general public. Questions were solicited from the public via social media on the League of Women Voters Richfield Facebook page and website, as well as postings on the Richfield Community Facebook page. Questions were checked for relevancy and appropriateness by members of the League of Women Voters Richfield. We are using a random order number grid to ask the order of each question. This is so no one is always going to be first or last, or always following the same person in answering questions. For the introductory remarks, we're going to be going in alphabetical order, and then following a random order for the questions. You have 2 minutes to make your introductory remarks. All answers will be given within a specific time limit. As I said, you will have 2 minutes for introductions. You will have 1 minute answering the League of Women Voters questions and the public's questions. And then you'll have a 1 minute summary and wrap up. The moderator will ask questions and each candidate will respond in order, one at a time. The timekeeper will keep time and show signs at 30 seconds and 1 minute. Please adhere to these times so that everyone has an opportunity to answer. There will be strict adherence to the time for each answer, and candidates will be given 1 warning to answer within that time period. Karen will show you the signs, which she has, and she will display at 30 seconds and when your time is up. Thank you so much for your attention, and now I will turn it over to Sue Sandel for the questions. And the first item will be introductions.
Thank you, Susan. Introductions will be in alphabetical order. After that, it'll be a random system. The first one to speak is Ms. Greenman, excuse me.
Great. Can you hear me? I feel like that's the Zoom question. Well, I am Emma Greenman, and I'm running for the State House here in the district of South Minneapolis and Eastern Richfield. Do you actually get an echo? Are you getting an echo?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's possible that folks need to mute their devices.
What did you say?
Is that better? Sometimes if everybody mutes, it's better. Sorry, I will start over. I think that is better. I'm Emma Greenman, and I'm running for the State House here in South Minneapolis and Eastern Richfield, 63B. And I'm running because I believe in the power of us here in the district and across the state of Minnesota to create a Minnesota where everyone thrives. I'm running here in this district that I grew up in, which is where I learned the power of building community, of bridging across difference, and investing in each other. It's that community investment, that support. That's why I'm here. And I know that we have a long way to go to ensure that every kid in Minnesota, every family has what they need to thrive. That's why I do the work I do. It's why I became an organizer on the Wellstone campaign, building a multiracial, multi-generational democracy. It's why I became a voting rights lawyer, and I've been working all across the country and here in Minnesota to protect and expand access to the ballot, especially this year. And as our state representative, I'll fight for our democracy and I'll fight for a future that we build together. I think that's a future where we invest in all of our kids from cradle to career. I think it's a future where we tackle climate change and we invest in families with affordable housing, healthcare, and childcare. And it's a future where we tackle the racial and economic disparities that are holding our state back. I think that's the future that we can build together. I don't have to tell anybody on this Zoom or out there that 2020 is a make or break moment for our democracy, and we must rise to this challenge. That's why I'm so grateful to be here with League of Women Voters and for all of that you do and the voters are doing this year, especially to ensure that folks are voting, that people have access to the ballot, and people can make their voices heard. Together, we can repair and reimagine our democracy. And I'm grateful to do that with all of you, and I'd ask for your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Howard?
Hi there. My name is Michael Howard, and I'm the state representative representing District 50A, Richfield, and parts of Bloomington in the Minnesota House. I first want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and doing so virtually, which is the safe, prudent thing to do amidst this COVID virus. And I just really appreciate you taking the health of all the candidates, of all of our constituents seriously. I'm running for re-election because I believe that our politics can be a positive force to improve lives. I learned that working as an intern on Paul Wellstone's campaign and through my commitment to social justice. And in my first term in the Minnesota House, I saw the power of people coming together and fighting for each other. That's how we beat Big Pharma and passed the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act. That's how we came together to pass a wage theft legislation that's nation leading, and how we came together to pass a balanced budget that's invested in our schools. Right now, we're facing some of the most challenging times any of us could ever imagine. The global pandemic has laid bare the racial and economic disparities that have plagued our state, and those will only deepen unless we commit to a future where everyone can thrive. That means investing in healthcare for all, housing for all, attacking our climate crisis, and bringing a racial justice lens to all of our work at the state capitol. I am all in for all of us because, frankly, we all need each other right now. And I hope you'll join me. And you can learn more at michaelhowardmn.com. I look forward to tonight's forum. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Knapper? Unmute.
So sorry. Good evening. I'm Diane Knapper, and I'm running for State Senate in District 63, which is part of Southeast Minneapolis and part of Northeast Richfield. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I've lived in Minnesota since 1989, and I've lived in my district for a little over 22 years. I'm a small business owner, and one of the reasons that I'm running for office is because I think it's time for a change. I think it's time for a fresh voice at the state capitol. I want to go to St. Paul and help improve the lives not only of the constituents in my district, but throughout the state of Minnesota. I want to work on things like public safety, education, getting our economy going again, helping small businesses, and finding out how we can save money and eliminate any type of redundancies and waste that's happening so that our government can be more efficient. I think it's important for first-time people to have a shot at going to office and helping to make lives better for their constituents, just like our founding fathers envisioned. You go into office for a couple of terms, you support your communities, and then you go back to your regular life. So that's what I'm looking to do, not to become a career politician. What I want to do is make sure that I'm fighting for your rights, your ability to choose for yourself what's best for you and your families. I will do everything I can to knock down those barriers because those are essential rights. Your right to life, your right to liberty, and your right to determine and choose your happiness. So I look forward to this forum, and I look forward to having your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pafko.
Thank you. I'm Frank Pafko, and I'm running for Minnesota House in 63B. I grew up in South Minneapolis. I attended Winona Elementary, Nokomis Junior High, and Roosevelt High School. I have been living in Richfield since 1982. I have a wife, 2 children, and 6 grandchildren, so I'm well aware of the school systems. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1975 with a Bachelor of Science in Fisheries. I worked for 36 years with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I rose from aquatic biologist to chief environmental officer for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Along the way, I was the first non-engineer to manage highway programs, project development as the Metro North Area Manager. I have managed multi-million-dollar office budget and highway projects totaling over $100 million. One project I'm especially proud of is Unweave the Weave, which is the junction of 35E and 694 north of St. Paul. Functionally, it was exactly the same kind of project as the Crosstown Commons project with 35W a few years back. Crosstown came in at $300 million, but I'm a frugal person and I was able to deliver Unweave the Weave for $125 million. During the collapse of the 35W bridge, which was a terrible tragedy, I was chief environmental officer. My team and I delivered the environmental documentation and the permits necessary to let that project in 9 days. I am aware, I have experience in how to make government more efficient, how to deliver goods and services, how to cut costs, and still deliver. And we are going to be looking at a major deficit coming up in the next legislature. Since I retired in 2012, I have been providing
Mr.
commentary.
Pafko.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Ms. Patricia Torres Ray, excuse me.
Good evening, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I have so much appreciation for the League and the opportunity that you give us to get in touch with the public. From my very first election, you were the first one to call me to say, we're going to have a forum. We want to know you. So I so appreciate your the work that you do on our behalf. I was elected to the Senate in 2006. I was given the privilege to represent this district that year, and I was elected as the first Latina elected to the Minnesota Senate. I came to this country 33 years ago, moved to Minneapolis. I have 2 boys and have been a resident of this district for 33 years. So I ran for office because I really wanted to be a voice for those who do not have a voice at the legislature. I felt that as a woman of color, as a person of color, and as an immigrant, there was a lack of diversity in the legislature. And that was what motivated me to learn about the legislative process and later on run. I worked for the state of Minnesota for 16 years before I became a senator. And my work has focused on health and human services and later on education. I believe that the top priorities of my district are really in line with my own personal priorities. And I fight every day to ensure that we do have the resources and connect the voices of my district to the entire state of Minnesota at the legislature. The focus of my priorities have been health and human services, education, environment, And right now, I am very focused on the work that we need to do to reconstruct Minneapolis, to offer opportunities, economic opportunities, deal with the pandemic and the impact that this pandemic has had on working families as well as low-income families. I am very concerned about housing, and I believe is one of the top priorities for our district, and is what I will be doing.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Thank you. Next speaker and the final introductory remarks from Ms. Halverson-Wickland.
Thank you, and thank you to the League for having this forum and this opportunity for us to talk with residents of Richfield. And thank you also for holding it in a way that is fair to all the candidates and help and is appreciative of the public health issues we're facing, and also allows us to connect with voters in our district. I'm Melissa Halverson-Wickland, and I serve Senate District 50 in the Minnesota Senate, and I represent a portion of Richfield, and then I'm also part of Bloomington as well. I am running, it's been an honor for me to serve the community of Richfield, and I am running and hoping to earn your vote, earn your support this fall again. During my time in the Senate, I've worked hard on issues such as healthcare and making our healthcare and prescription drugs more affordable for residents. I worked along with Representative Howard to pass the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act this year, and this was a way to address the really too high costs of insulin in our country. It provides a way for patients to access an emergency supply as well as affordable insulin for a longer term. I was very proud to work with the Alex Smith family, Nicole Smith Holt and her husband, on this bill, and I think it is one way we're making a difference. Other areas I've worked on in the Senate are education, ensuring adequate funding, and also working on early childhood and trying to strengthen our childcare system. So I'm looking forward to questions tonight.
Thank you, Ms. The next one is the first question, and you each have 1 minute. Why are you running for office, and what will be your major priorities if elected? And the first speaker is Mr. Pafko.
Thank you. I'm running for office because Minneapolis and Richfield politics have been dominated by progressive politicians for over 50 years, and the problems keep growing. My priorities, the first thing we need to do is to reopen our economy and end the emergency. We have to get the economy working again. We then have to overcome our budget deficit, which is going to be, we've gone from over $1 billion surplus to at least a $6 billion deficit, and we cannot solve that problem solely on the backs of taxpayers. We are going to have to make government more efficient. We are going to have to streamline services and reduce the budget that way, rather than solely tax taxpayers to provide those services.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Next speaker is Ms. Torres-Ray.
Thank you. I am running for office because I really want to be a voice for those who are typically ignored at the legislature, and those include minorities, LGBTQ communities, immigrants, older individuals, and in general, people who typically are not consulted by the legislature in terms of making policy. I believe very strongly that we need to talk about the power of the people designing the solutions that work for people. And during the next few years, I believe that most of the emphasis that I'm going to be placing on is not only bringing those voices to the legislature, but making sure that we really design policies that meet the needs of the current populations. We have a tremendous crisis in public housing and housing that is affordable to working class families. And we also have the largest disparities in the country. We have been talking about these disparities for many, many years, but we have not.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray.
Thank you.
Ms. Wicklund.
Thank you. I'm running for re-election to the state senate to continue to serve the residents of Richfield and to work on the issues that are the complex issues that we're facing in our communities and in our state. I think some of the key priorities going forward for me will be working to build just and fair and equitable systems of public safety, of education, of healthcare. We will have to address a severe budget deficit next year. And so one of the priorities is creating a budget that is equitable and fair to those who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and working on education and continuing to work on education and healthcare, because these are foundations for us to come out of this economic recession. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wicklund. Ms. Greenman.
I'm running for the state house because I believe in the power of us through government to create real change in our communities and to create a Minnesota where every kid, every family, every member of our community thrives with no exception. And I think to do that, we have to start. My first priority will be repairing and reimagining our democracy. I don't think we can make a progress on the big issues facing us: climate change, racial inequities, criminal justice reform, economic inequalities, without doing the work to repair and reimagine our democracy, to ensure that every person has a voice and a vote, to ensure that we're getting the money that's distorting our politics out of our government, and to make sure that we have a fair and accurate census and redistricting. So those will be my priorities as we go into 2020 and 2021.
Thank you. Ms. Knapper? Unmute. Ms. Knapper? Unmute.
Sorry. I do this all the time, and I don't mean to do that. I'm running for state senate because I believe it's time for a fresh voice in my district. I'm looking forward to working with others in the legislature to get things done, to make compromises, to think outside the box in ways that will be beneficial to not only my constituents, but across the state. My biggest priority is going to be public safety because, as we all know, the events of May of this year have spilled outside of Minnesota and across the country, and crime is spiking. All kinds of things are just, carjackings are up, and we need to fix that first so that all Minnesotans can feel safe when they leave their homes, when they stay in their homes, and when they're traveling to and from work. My second priority would be education and making sure that parents have choices to send their children to the schools that will best meet their needs.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
I'm running for the state house because I believe in the power of our politics to improve lives. And that's more important now more than ever. Without question, our top priority as a government at all levels is to respond to our public health crisis. We need to respond with clear eyes, an open heart, and with science guiding our decisions. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of talk about we need to open the economy. Well, we can't open the economy until we defeat this virus and make sure that people are healthy. And in the meantime, we need to invest in the economic security of the Minnesotans who have been most hurt. The virus has laid bare our racial inequities. That's why we need to invest in housing, healthcare for all, childcare, paid family leave. We need to listen to the Minnesotans that are struggling and to bring those voices to the Capitol and to fight for change.
Thank you. Next question. Minnesota has stark racial inequities in income, education, and home ownership. What are your ideas for reducing and eliminating these inequities? And Mr. Howard, you are first on this one.
In many ways, our state's racial inequities are the biggest challenge we will face for the next generation to come. We like to think of Minnesota as a leader, but frankly, we're a leader in these racial gaps. And so we need to make them a priority, really with all of our policymaking. To talk specifically about something I'm working on in the area of housing, we need to make sure that Minnesotans can afford their home. And as you mentioned, we have some of the largest gaps in terms of home ownership and folks that are able to afford their homes. I've authored the Bring It Home housing subsidy, which would ensure that every single Minnesotan is able to pay no more than 30% of their income on housing. I believe this would help us narrow those gaps. And because so much starts with home stability, that will help us improve racial outcome or racial inequities in our schools, health outcomes, economic outcomes. I believe that all roads lead back to home, and that really needs to be a focus of the next legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Ms. Knapper.
Inequities are not good for any society, but they do happen. I think the top priority would be for income, and that would be creating economic opportunities for people that will stabilize their homes and create stronger families. One of those things would be working with the opportunity zones that are available and bringing good jobs to lower income neighborhoods. The other thing we can do is make sure that we are eliminating the burdensome regulations that hinder growth of small, medium, and large businesses in our state. We need to lower our taxes so that we don't lose more big companies. And then education, that goes back to school choice. If we have parents have more school choice, the funding dollars travel with the child, they will get their needs met where they're being educated.
Thank you. Ms. Greenman.
Minnesota can't thrive if we don't tackle our really devastating racial and economic disparities and really say that it's going to be our first priority, that we're going to apply an equity lens to everything we do. And that starts by looking at outcomes and really investing in the things that we hear practitioners and folks impacted tell us improve outcomes in education, in housing, in our criminal justice reform. And it also means we actually have to look at the structural inequalities, the systemic racism, and address that. And I think that starts by changing our system so that we're actually rooting that policymaking in the voices and the lives of folks who are most impacted. I think we have to prioritize this. We have to do the work and ensure that we are creating a Minnesota where everybody thrives.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
Thank you. This is really my work. It's something that I have been doing prior to running for office, and today is really working to eliminate these disparities. After 33 years of working on this, I believe that we need to do more targeted efforts and invest in targeted approaches in education, healthcare, and economic development. We have the largest disparities in every area in the state of Minnesota. We also need to offer specific training to populations that are hard to employ, and we need to invest in those trainings opportunities. I also believe that it is incredibly important that we address the inequities that exist in education, and right now we are seeing tremendous gaps in terms of access to virtual education. We are going to face a significant deficit, and we are going to have to look at how do we invest dollars in these communities that are targeted to eliminate the very disparities that create these gaps that exist in the area.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Mr. Pafko.
Thank you. Racial inequities in the economy, our low and moderate wage employees in the service industry have been the hardest hit by this emergency, and we need to follow the lead of our neighboring states in reopening the economy and getting those people back to work. Over the long term, education is the key. And our public education system has been failing for the last half a century, particularly students of color. We need to reopen the schools. We need to give choice. We need to give education choice so that state dollars follow the student, not the school district, and they can have find the best opportunity. Parents can find the best opportunity for their children. As far as home ownership, reforming regulation, reforming local building codes. Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular have such high codes that it adds tens of thousands of costs to the cost of home ownership.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Ms. Halverson-Wickland.
Thank you. I think we do need to put a lot of focus on how we are going to address the racial inequities, economic inequities, and health disparities that we see in our state. One way that, or one, excuse me, one area that we need to focus on is education. As we have children, their school systems kind of interrupted now with different learning through virtual learning. We need to put a focus on how do we make sure that that is happening equitably. We need to protect educational funding. And I think as we look to next session when we're working on our budgets, we need to have a focus on those who have been most impacted by the coronavirus, the pandemic, lower income workers, and people of color have been disproportionately affected. We need to work on the systems that support these people.
Thank you, Ms. Wickland. Next question. Due to the economic impact of COVID-19, the state budget will likely show a significant deficit and the budget reserve has been depleted. How do you think the state should balance the budget and build the reserve? And the first one on this one is Ms. Halverson-Wickland.
Thank you. Yes, the budget next year is going to be extremely challenging to create a balanced budget as we are required to do in the odd years. We will be needing to look for ways to balance the budget with all the tools we have available, whether that's the money from reserves, funding from looking at programs that may have to be changed or reduced. We will also need to look at ways to bring in additional revenue, and that I think should be done by looking at those who are more fortunate and who have the ability to contribute more at this time, and whether it's increasing taxes on higher income individuals or corporations that are doing okay. And so we need to make sure that this is a fair process and that we aren't negatively impacting those who have been most affected.
Thank you. Mr. Pafko.
Thank you. The first thing we have to do in order to start solving the budget problem is to reopen our economy. We have to get the engine of economic growth going again. We need, from a legislative standpoint, we need to reduce waste and fraud that has been rampant in our state government for the past number of years. We need to streamline state services. We need to make it more efficient. Taxes are the last, raising taxes is the last resort to balance the budget, not the first. The taxpayers of Minnesota cannot bear the entire burden. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knapper.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Pafko. We do need to look at our budget from top to bottom and find out where the inefficiencies are, where the redundancies are, where the waste is happening, where the fraud is happening. We have to plug these holes so that we have the money and the resources available to do the things that we need to do. We also need to get the economy going again, get that tax base, get that revenue flowing in again, and make sure that we're not raising taxes on companies that are just going to go elsewhere and take their business and their jobs with them. We need those businesses to help keep our economy strong and to help keep all of us thriving. And getting our economy going again, like Mr. Pafko said, is the way to make sure that we have enough funds so that we can take care of our priorities that we need to take care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
I am concerned about the deficit, of course, like everyone else. Our budget, however, is for 48.9 billion. So I believe that we can correct this deficit without making drastic cuts to essential programs. I have expressed that specific concern to the governor and the lieutenant governor, and have said to them that I will oppose any cuts to programs that serve the poor and the most vulnerable people in our state. So I have had early conversations with them and asked for a specific review on budgets and administrative costs that we may be able to reduce, but not eliminate the programs that are essential to people in our district and in the state of Minnesota. I also believe that it is very important that we review. This pandemic has given us an opportunity to see how can we incorporate innovation into our work and save money. There are many people who are working from right now.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
My top budget priority will be to protect the interests of the Minnesotans who have been most harmed during this pandemic. And those are the same people that have been harmed greatly during past budget deficits. In the past, we've been governed by budgeted via slogan by no new taxes and live within our means. And that has meant deep cuts to our schools, to our people with disabilities, to the healthcare for Minnesotans. We absolutely, during a global pandemic, cannot take that approach. We need to raise revenue by raising taxes on the wealthy corporations and Minnesotans who have done quite well. Just one specific statistic, Jeff Bezos has made so much money during this pandemic that he could give a $100,000 wage to the 800,000 Amazon workers. People are getting rich during this pandemic, and those are the folks that should pay their fair share. We should protect the Minnesotans who have lost their jobs and are doing everything they can to help their families get by during this pandemic.
Thank you. Ms. Greenman.
Our budget in this state is a reflection of our values, and there's no more important time to reinforce our investment in people and communities and in our small businesses than at a moment like this where so many folks are harmed and hurting. And so before we talk about cuts or any of that, we do need to talk about a progressive approach to taxation. As Representative Howard said, folks are getting rich. Rich folks are getting richer. Companies are making a ton of money. And we need to ensure that in Minnesota, we have the budget that provides for folks, that invests in both the immediate needs of folks who are really hurting and also our long-term success as a state. Minnesota got here because we invested in education. We need to address our equity issues so that we are investing for the long term in every Minnesotan, and we need a budget that will do that.
Thank you. The next question, how big of a problem is racially disparate treatment of people of color by police? And what are your thoughts on reducing and eliminating these inequities? And the first speaker is Ms. Knapper.
Thank you. It is a problem. I think that the way we address it is that we look at public safety as a two-way street. Both sides have a responsibility to keeping everyone safe. I think that if we had more economic opportunities, that might help reduce the level of crime that we have. But crime is crime, and crime is actually colorblind. So the disparities that are happening there, I think that they are not good, but they are also not as prevalent as some may say. And we definitely need some reform within our police departments, and we can certainly work with them to make that happen. But we just need to realize that we're all humans, and we all have to be responsible for our actions and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
You know, we just need to be clear with Minnesotans that we have continue to have issues with systemic racism in policing. And this issue isn't unique to Richfield, to Bloomington, to Minneapolis. It's across this country, and it goes back hundreds of years. So we need to first acknowledge that that is our reality and then do the hard work and work together to change that. So what does that look like? I think most importantly, we need to listen to the communities that have been most affected by this trauma. And we took positive steps this year after the horrific murder of George Floyd to pass some police accountability reforms. I was proud to work on police arbitration reform, which I believe is a key way to hold officers that do break the public trust accountable. That accountability is very important, but we need to do more to build trust between community and law enforcement, and that begins by making sure that community has a voice and a stake in the changes that we make.
Thank you. Ms. Greenman.
The research is clear, and the fact that we have systemic inequities, racial inequities in our policing is a fact. That can't be in dispute. And we need to ensure that everybody in our community is safe. And that requires really looking at where we are at today. The murder of George Floyd is at the hands of police, the over-policing of Black and brown communities, the threatening presence of ICE are doing real harm to our communities. And so to the point of how we start addressing this, we have to actually acknowledge that it's a systemic issue, and we have to structurally change the way we do policing. We have to structurally change the way our criminal justice system works. And we start by centering the voices. So we have to restore the right to vote for folks on probation and parole so they can be an integral part of reimagining the way we do justice in our state and in our country.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
Thank you. I think we begun to do some very critical reforms at the legislature this year, led by the House of Representatives. We need to continue that work. I think that the community needs to be involved in the process of reforming the police, and that we need to fundamentally change the way we do policing in our communities. I also want to talk about the differences between different districts and different cities. Minneapolis, Richfield are very diverse cities where diverse communities really need to be participating in designing this new model of policing. Our communities are different. We have communities in rural Minnesota where everybody knows everybody, small towns. We have to do better in Minneapolis and Richfield as we grow more diverse and as we establish greater connections with our law enforcement. We need to recruit more people, and we really need to enforce the rule of making sure that officers live in our communities. So they are part of our communities, they understand our communities, and are able to work with us.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Mr. Pafko?
Yes. Racial inequity, systematic racism is a problem, particularly in the Minneapolis Police Department. Minneapolis Police Department has been run for the last half a century by liberal DFL politicians in the mayor's office and in the city council. The chief last year asked for an additional 400 officers, and today they're down. They haven't gotten any new ones, and they're down 250 officers. We need to support and fully fund our police departments, and as a state legislature, tie fiscal disparities to the cities to the provision of adequate police report. Black on black crime is the single biggest problem that needs to be solved, and more policing, all coupled with good police reforms, getting rid of the bad cops, giving them the support they need to do the job is the start to doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Ms. Wickland.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that systemic racism and racial inequities are a huge part of the problem that we face with our public safety system, and it also is a factor across many other systems in our society, and we need to work on them all to address these issues. In terms of public safety, I think one of the key things we need to do is to understand better what communities feel they need to feel safe, and what role they want to see from the people that are designated to protect their safety. We need to have enforceable ways that police are accountable for their actions, and we need to provide ways that we can make public safety work better by greater training and greater work in those areas as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wicklund. Next question. What is your position on environmental sustainability, and what policies, if any, do you plan to support to address climate change? And the first speaker on this is Ms. Greenman.
Climate change is an existential threat to our way of life, to the way of life of everyone around the globe, and we have to address it. And the fact that President Trump is not only refusing to address it, but is making it worse, means that Minnesota really needs to lead. States need to lead to create the policy that will create resilient communities and will actually start addressing climate change and our carbon crisis. We need to start by transitioning to 100% clean energy and renewable energy. And that starts with investments at the state level in getting to 100% through electric cars, through an electricity grid that works, through agricultural reforms. But we need to do that, and we need to do that now. And I'd say we need to follow the leadership of advocates and of young folks who are in the streets demanding that we act for their world, that we act for a better future. We can see the impact of climate change right now. So we need to act.
Thank you, Ms. Greenman. Ms. Knapper.
Thank you. It's actually environmentally irresponsible not to upgrade a 60-year-old pipeline to modern engineering and safety standards. I'm speaking specifically about line 3. I think we need to support that in order to bring jobs, which helps everyone. And we know that our technology has advanced, and we know that our methods have advanced. There are ways that we can create energy that don't pollute as much as they did even 50 years ago. So I don't think that we need to go all full-blown new Green Deal, but I do know that businesses want to make money, and they're not going to make money if they're polluting the environment. They don't want to turn away their customers. So I think we need to work with our businesses and let them develop the technologies and the innovations that will protect our environment while being sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
This is such an important question. And if you talk to young Minnesotans, this is by far their top priority. I was participating in a youth and government forum, and 20 high school students raised their hand about what their top priorities. 19 of them said climate change. And so we have to lead in Minnesota, especially because we're not seeing action at the federal government. And the good thing is Minnesota has been a leader. Actually, under Governor Pawlenty, Minnesota passed a nation-leading renewable energy standard. And this wasn't a partisan issue. Folks said we weren't going to make that standard, and we're hitting it. So 100% by 2050 is a realistic goal and one we need to set out to. Specific to sustainability, we also need to help individuals make choices that respond to climate change and improve energy sustainability. Just in the city of Richfield, we've seen the city take an active role and citizens take an active role. The legislature can support through grants and otherwise investments that can improve sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. Pafko.
The climate is changing. The climate has always changed. Our spot in the Senate district in 63 has alternately been the bottom of a tropical sea and buried under a mile of ice. That's the range of normal climatic variation. I have been MnDOT's representative on the State Global Warming Task Force in the 90s and on the Energy and Environment Subcabinet during the 2000s. I'm well aware of this. A good economy allows us to adapt to whatever the climate will happen. Right now, we have entered a grand solar minimum, and it looks like the projections is for things to get colder rather than warmer. We do need to make our energy systems more efficient, but currently wind and solar, when you look at life cycle costs, actually are more costly and actually have higher inputs.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko.
Carbon.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Ms. Wickland.
Thank you. Yes, as it has been said, climate change is something that we need to take extremely seriously, and we need to apply more effort at the state level to do what we can to address this key issue. Even though we have difficult times ahead to try and face the public health crisis that's in front of us, we need to continue to focus on our future, and our young people expect us to do that. So focusing on clean energy, renewable energy policies that we can enforce at the state level. In terms of sustainability, I think there are a lot of local efforts. I know that school districts are trying to find ways to conserve and save energy, and we need to be supportive of these efforts by way of changing policies or providing grants to either installation of solar cells, things like that.
Thank you, Ms. Okay, next question. Are you in favor of passing a bonding bill in January 2021 or before? Why or why not? What projects will be impacted in this district if it is not passed? And the first speaker is Mr. Pafko.
Thank you. I believe we have to get a handle on our budget deficit before we know how much money we have to serve bonds in the future. So no, I am not in favor of passing a bonding bill immediately. I am in favor of a bonding bill in conjunction with the next biennial budget. The projects that should be served by that bonding bill are projects which directly benefit the economy of the state of Minnesota, particularly broadband and internet infrastructure that can serve this rise in online education. We cannot have these pet projects which will require ongoing operational expenses like the Northern Lights Express. We have to do projects which benefit the economy.
Thank you.
Sue, I don't believe Ms. Torres-Ray got to answer question 5.
I apologize. I am so sorry. I will go back to that right now. What is your position on environmental sustainability, and what policies, if any, do you plan to support to address climate change? Ms. Torres-Ray. I'm sorry about that.
I so appreciate the opportunity because this is such an important issue for me, obviously for the district. I appreciate that you called me on. I believe that it is absolutely essential that we address climate change, and we have many opportunities that we need to pursue in order to do this. We need to really invest in renewable and clean energy. I think that we haven't done enough in the state of Minnesota. We have started with some solar projects that have really not been fully funded, and we need to expand that. We also need to address issues around transportation. We are behind in transit and investing in public transportation, really behind many states, even our neighboring states. So it's time for us to address that issue. And also protecting our forests. I think we have seen what is happening in the West Coast, and it has really creating incredible awareness about what we need to do in Minnesota. So there is a tremendous opportunity for us to look into what we need to do with our forest. And then obviously addressing policy around agriculture. I think this is a very important conversation we need to have in a state that where the economy is based on agriculture.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Thank you, and I apologize for that.
No problem.
And I will repeat the question since we skipped around. The question we are now talking about is bonding. Are you in favor of passing a bonding bill in January 2021 or before? Why or why not? And what projects will be impacted in this district if it is not passed? And we've heard from Mr. Pafko and now Mr. Howard.
We should pass a bonding bill immediately. We should have passed one months ago. Unfortunately, Republicans in the legislature have decided to play politics with the pandemic rather than pass a bonding bill. And this is the time now more than ever when we need to take advantage of low interest rates, inject needed resources into our economy to create jobs and invest in infrastructure. Specifically for our community, I'm the author of the 77th Street Underpass bonding project. This is a project that's at the finish line. It needs an injection of a bit more resources to move forward. This will help our community greatly. And on housing, we need to make hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in housing, and now is exactly the time to do it with the bonding bill. We should pass one in a special session in 2020, and then we should come back and pass another one in 2021.
Thank you. Ms. Halverson-Wicklund.
Thank you. Yes, I support passage of a bonding bill. I believe we should have passed one before now, and I wish that the Republicans had been more persuaded to look out for our state's residents and workers in moving forward with a bonding bill as a priority rather than holding out for some of the kind of irrational requests. In our district, I am also the author in the Senate of the 77th Street Underpass. And as Representative Howard said, this project is just near being fully funded. It is ready to go. The city has done all the work to prepare, and the design is ready. So we need this small amount and this project can move forward. This would not only benefit residents of Richfield and create jobs, and it would benefit the community when 494 work begins.
Thank you, Ms. Wicklund. Ms. Knapper.
Thank you. Just like families have to prioritize what their household budget is and decide if they can afford certain things, our legislature needs to do the same. So all of the agencies that are requesting money, we need to have them prioritize those and make sure that the things that they are wanting to do are must-haves and not nice-to-haves. Additionally, we should prioritize our projects on things that improve public safety and that also increase our economic development. That will actually allow for more private entities to cover certain funding projects and reducing the cost to the state. So will I vote? Do I think we should vote right away? Not necessarily. It depends on what's in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
I absolutely support the bonding bill. I think we should have passed one, and I think we should pass one immediately in January. Bonding bills are incredibly important. They fund our public infrastructure that is in need of help, but they also create jobs. And I think this is, after this pandemic, this is really an important issue that we need to address. And for our district in particular, I think Representative Howard and Melissa have talked about the 77th Street, which is a very important corridor that we have to fund, and housing. Housing is an imperative. We need affordable housing in our district, and this is the time to do it because of low interest rates. So I fully support the funding project, and also, many of the transit projects and the projects for transportation, roads that are so essential for commuting, for workers, for connecting our district to the rest of the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. And Ms. Greenman.
I support a bonding bill, and I want to thank actually Representative Howard, Senator Wickland, and Senator Torres-Ray really have been fighting for the bonding bill. We should have passed a large, robust bonding bill that invests in projects across the state of Minnesota. Like in a moment when we are faced with an economic crisis, the idea that we're not taking advantage of the AAA bond rating, of the low interest rates, to invest in projects that need to get done, like the 77 Trudeau underpass, but also our long-term structural investments in Minnesota. We need to do that, and they are the job creators. They create good family-sustaining jobs here in the district, as well as across the state of Minnesota. So I think we need to pass it in special session on Monday, and then we need to go and pass another one in January. We need to take advantage of this opportunity to support our state and also the workers of our state.
Thank you. Next question. The positivity rate of new COVID-19 cases remains at about 5% in Minnesota. Do you believe enough is being done to control the spread in Minnesota? Are there other methods you would recommend? Do you support the continuing extension of Governor Walz's emergency powers? And the first one is Ms. Torres-Ray.
I do support the actions of Governor Walz, and I believe that his actions and the support that he has received from the House, but also ultimately from the legislature, have been very important to containing the pandemic. Our numbers look good in relationship to our neighboring districts, and we have looked at the statistics on that. I do believe that we need to make a greater effort to target efforts with communities of color, with low-income communities, address some of the issues around our homeless population. And I think that we haven't done specific work. I think Hennepin County has done some excellent work in terms of targeting dollars, but I don't think the state of Minnesota has been able to do it, in part because the Senate has not really been a good partner in terms of holding hearings to really understand the impact of the pandemic on specific populations. So this lack of cooperation of the Senate has impeded a partnership that really needs to exist with the executive branch in order to target resources.
Thank you, Ms. Torres-Ray. Ms. Greenman.
COVID-19 has upended our lives. It's upended the health of many people. And we frankly need to address the fact that we have had a failed federal response or non-response. And that has left it to states, to governors like Governor Walz and 49 other governors who've had to fend for themselves with the support of people who are doing amazing things to care for each other. But we know that that's just not enough. In Minnesota, I think that I support Governor Walz's using all of the levers that he has, and that the legislature doing what they can. My little sister's a nurse. She works in nursing homes, and I will say that nurses and frontline staff are still fighting for PPE. They're still fighting for hazard pay. And I was just with SEIU on strike, where radiologists and techs are still fighting to just get paid time off. So we have a long way to go to support families and workers who are really struggling with this, and we need to do better.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Ms. Wickland.
Thank you. I do believe that the governor has been working on addressing the pandemic in a very reasonable and thoughtful and public health focused way. And I support his continued ability to have the tools necessary to work on the issues of the pandemic by use of the peacetime emergency declaration. I believe that gives him access to some tools that would speed up, or that speeds up our ability to procure items that we need. And I think that is important to continue for him to have those tools. I also think that we as a society need to be more focused on how we can all work together to reduce transmission, because we won't be able to go back to something like our normal society or in normal lives without all of us working together to reduce the spread of the disease.
Thank you, Ms. Wickland. The next speaker is Mr. Howard.
I would echo what Emma mentioned about the lack of a federal response. That has put states in a terrible position. But luckily, we have a governor in this state that's taken incredible leadership to protect the lives of Minnesotans. So I absolutely support the governor's efforts. Things like the mask mandate, working to limit crowds, and his eviction moratorium have been critical tools to keep Minnesotans safe. And in the absence of any leadership whatsoever from the Senate Republicans, those have been more important than ever. Keep in mind, the Senate Republican leader basically said if he was in charge, there would be zero effort by the government to limit crowds. He'd be okay with 60,000 people in a Viking stadium, for example. It would be an unmitigated disaster. We just have to look at the behaviors of some of the Republican leaders in this country and state to show us that they're not taking this serious. And that's something that we as leaders all can do. Senator Wickland is right. Each one of us have an ability to help lessen the spread of this, and we can model good behavior to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Ms. Knapper, excuse me.
Thank you. I think the first thing we need to do is really look at the numbers and look at what a positive test actually means. As we know, the COVID-19 disease itself, the virus itself, has a 98% survival rating. And so we talk about the number of positive tests, but only 1% of our population is testing positive. 90% of those who test positive no longer require isolation. We've had only 0.1% of our population that required hospitalization. So I think we need to be realistic and let the public make choices for themselves. I definitely do not agree with the way Governor Walz has handled this. We need to end the lockdown. We need to open up our economy. We can do it safely, and we need to make sure that the legislature and Minnesotans are the ones making that decision instead of Governor Walz by himself and unilaterally. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Pafko.
My 92-year-old aunt was in memory care in Village Shores. She had suffered a series of 3 strokes. She was locked into solitary confinement the last 2 months of her life. And when she died, she was asymptomatic, but yet a late COVID test said she had it, and she is listed as one of the deaths due to COVID. From then on, I knew that the numbers that are being talked about are talking about people who die maybe with COVID, but definitely not from COVID. The most effective numbers were hospitalizations and ICU beds used, and that's what the Walz administration is no longer telling us. The testing for cases, we don't know if that's individuals or if one person is given 3 tests, he's positive, and that becomes 3 cases.
Thank you, Mr. Pafko. Next question. What is your position on restoring the right to vote for convicted felons who have served their time in prison? Please explain your position. And the first speaker on this one is Mr. Howard.
Absolutely. We absolutely should restore the vote. We've had questions about issues of racial equity. This is a huge racial equity issue. This is a criminal justice issue. And at the Capitol this year, this was a bill that moved forward in the House. Again, Senate Republicans blocked it. We heard from a woman who had a 40-year probation and is not going to be able to vote until she's 72 unless the law is changed. That's ridiculous. When folks have served their time, they deserve the opportunity to participate in their government. That should be a desired outcome and goal to encourage civic participation. And so this is an absolute no-brainer, and we should make it happen in 2021.
Ms. Halverson-Wickland.
Yes, I'm a strong supporter of providing or restoring the right to vote when someone has finished their time. In fact, in my first term, we did vote on, when the Democrats were in the majority in the Senate, we did vote on this bill, and I voted to support that. And I think we should have had an outcome, I know, several years ago that would have brought this to fruition. I believe that it's the fair thing, and it is what we were asking people to work towards, re-entering society and becoming productive and positive members of society. And I think that accessing the right to vote should be part of that.
Thank you. Mr. Pafko.
The Minnesota Constitution provides that felons can have their voting rights restored after they have fully completed their sentence. Probation is part of that sentence. So what you are proposing requires a constitutional amendment. And if there is excessive probation, if somebody gets 40 years of probation, then maybe we need judicial reform. Maybe we need probation reform rather than a constitutional amendment. Yes, when those sentences are completed, I agree. They should have their voting rights restored, and we have to start looking at sentencing reform before we look at amending the Constitution.
Thank you. Knapper.
I also agree that once someone has served their sentence, that they should have the right to vote. And it sounds like we do need some reform in sentencing and probation guidelines, because I also agree that 40 years probation is quite excessive. So what can we do to reform that system, reform that part of that process, so that people aren't being unnecessarily or unfairly left out of their ability to participate in elections and voting for their representation.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
I do fully support restoring the vote for people who have served their sentences. As Senator Wickland stated, we voted in the Senate. I have voted in the past for this bill, and I will continue to support it. I think that this strengthens our democracy, and there is absolutely no reason for why people who have already served their time should not be allowed to vote. I fully support it.
Thank you. And Ms. Greenman.
I absolutely support restoring the right to vote for folks on probation and parole. As a voting rights lawyer, I've actually worked on this issue across the country. In Maryland, we restored the right to vote. In Florida, in 2018, voters, and not just, this is not a partisan issue, over 60% of voters in Florida voted to restore the right to vote for returning citizens. We here in Minnesota need to get this done. And as Senator Wickland said, we should have done it years ago. When we talk about how we want to reimagine our community safety, when we talk about education, when we talk about our economy, we need to center the voices of everyone in our community. And that requires ensuring that everyone in our community can vote and participate. So we need to get that job done.
Thank you. Okay, next question. The governor has appointed a Met Council Oversight Committee to evaluate the governance structure of the Met Council. Do you think this is needed? Why or why not? And our first speaker is Ms. Wickland.
So I have been a part of discussions on the local government committee that I have been on the last 4 years. Discussions about different ways that the governance should work for the Met Council, different ways for the members to be selected, different processes. And while I have not supported the Republican proposals that I don't feel would solve problems, I think they would create other problems. I do support reviewing and examining the ways that the governance structure is set up, and whether there are any reforms that could be made to it that would make it more representative and maybe have some dampening of the impact of the governor being able to select all of these members of a very important, they have a very important impact on our metropolitan area.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
I would largely echo the comments of Senator Wickland. You know, I'm definitely open to studying this and seeing if there can be some sort of tweaks or improvements, if you will. But the Met Council does serve a valuable role in terms of regional governance, in terms of housing, transportation, and functions. And some of the reforms proposed by Republicans, I agree, would create more problems than solutions. And in general, we should be working to tweak and strengthen and improve the process with the Met Council, not create an entire new governance structure that will, frankly, create more problems.
Thank you. Ms. Torres-Ray.
This is an issue that I care very deeply about, and I intend to work on during the next 2 years. I believe that the mission of the Metropolitan Council is a very important mission, and the appointment of the governance has become a very political process. You know, the governors appoint people that ultimately are really not accountable, in my opinion. And we need to change that. We have failed to invest in affordable housing, addressing some of our key transportation issues. And we have entered a political fight on this. We have a disagreement when the Republicans have a governor that they agree. They don't say anything. When we have a governor, we don't say anything because they are appointed by the governor. These people serve the state of Minnesota, our metropolitan area, and we need to make sure that they actually do implement the mission of the council. So I intend to work on this issue very directly during the next 2 years.
Thank you. Ms. Knapper.
This is a subject that I will need to do a little bit more research on, but I definitely agree that the Met Council needs to be more accountable to everyone that they serve, as well as other parts of the state that are helping to fund their projects. So appointing a council to look at the reforms, there probably is room for reform within the Met Council, and I would support that. But again, I would need to do a little bit more research.
Thank you. Ms. Greenman.
I also believe in the mission of Met Council and of what metropolitan governance means. You know, as a voting rights lawyer, I'm deeply committed to the idea that we need to ensure and really reimagine our systems of governance to bring more people in, to bring in stakeholders and communities, to ensure that the voices of folks who are actually impacted by the policies that we're creating are actually at the table. And so I would look at any reforms through that lens. I will say that a Republican Senate that is hostile to government in general probably doesn't have that in mind. And so I really think that we need to not just look at attacking our systems, but actually figuring out how we can reimagine systems to make them more democratic and more inclusive of everybody's voices.
Thank you. Mr. Pafko.
Met Council governance does need reform. I worked with the Metropolitan Council for a major part of my career. The current setup violates federal law in that a appointed body allocates federal transportation dollars. Federal law requires that it be an elective body. They use smoke and mirrors, and basically both Democrat and Republican administrations nationally ignoring the problem to allow this to fester. There is an inherent conflict of interest when you have a body that runs the Metro Transit system that allocates flexible federal transportation dollars to the Met Transit system. That is a conflict of interest which needs to stop, and many of its functions need to be separated out, and the Met Council itself needs to become an elected body.
Thank you. And I believe that was everyone on that question. I think we have time for one more question before our final remarks. My timekeeper agree? We'll start and maybe speak quickly and take 45 seconds. What kind of statewide testing should be done in Minnesota high schools to determine readiness for college and careers? And first speaker is Ms. Knapper.
Statewide testing. I believe that one of the most critical things that people can know as they leave high school and as they embark on careers is to understand how their government works and understand basic information, know how to read, know how to write, know how to do math, things that are going to propel them as they embark on their careers, understanding that college isn't necessarily for everyone. Making sure that they can attend the schools or the programs that are going to get them the most out of their lives. So statewide testing, sometimes it's hard to kind of standardize these things, but I think a foundational knowledge of civics is really important, as well as the basics of reading and writing and mathematics.
Thank you. Ms. Wickland.
I think that statewide testing has to be viewed with care and concern. I believe that students, when they graduate from high school, should have gone through a program and should be held to the standards of the district's high school program, and that when you graduate with a high school diploma, that means something, because we have educational standards in areas. And that basing it on moving on to another program based on a test, I think is challenging, because tests can be biased and not really reflect the true knowledge of students. So I think tests need to be used in schools to help teachers understand where their students are at, and they need to be focused on making sure that teachers have the information they need to understand how to help their students move forward. And from there, I think, we need to be careful about how we use them.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wickland. Ms. Torres-Ray.
We have a lot of discussions about this issue in our education committee, and I have expressed my opposition to testing. I believe that the testing that we have right now is obsolete. Clearly, when you enter college, the only test that colleges care about is the ACT. They don't look at any other test for any other score. They look at the ACT. So why do we have other tests? I do not know why. And the reality is that today, what we need to do is to structure a system that helps teachers measure growth, understand how gaps exist academically and what they need to do, what resources they need to eliminate these academic gaps. That's all we need. And we have research that actually proves that and shows that this is the only necessary tool for teachers is to measure growth, academic growth of their students. The tests really don't measure the academic growth that is necessary, and the ACT score is required by colleges. So those are the tests that I support.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Howard.
I'll try to save us some time. Everything that Senator Torres-Ray and Senator Wickland said was right on. We should be seeking to limit testing. Frankly, we're completely over testing our kids, and we should look for ways to limit it. And Senator Torres was right on about the ACT in terms of college entrance. And so we should work to support our teachers and our students, and that means limiting testing, frankly.
Thank you. And Ms. Greenman.
Focusing on the goal of ensuring that every kid in Minnesota is ready for college and they're ready for what's next. We have seen talk to teachers. We have seen talk to students. We have seen that testing is more reflective of the disparities and the biases and resources in our communities than it is in judging potential or readiness. And so we need to focus on the things that teachers and that schools are saying work, and that's not statewide testing. We also see at the national level a movement away from even those standardized tests, because what we know is that's actually not the best way to judge long-term potential. So let's focus on the priorities, which is making sure that we have every kid in Minnesota has the education they need to succeed after high school.
Thank you. Now have-
Sue, you skipped over Mr. Pafko for that
Did I do
last
that?
question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pafko, go ahead.
The ACT and the SAT are tests designed to predict how well a student is going to do at college. We need to continue that. But if there are problems with that kind of thing, it's because the schools are failing our students. And education choice will bring allowing the parents to choose the best school experience for their child and use the state funds to pay for that is the best way to bring competition, to bring improvement into our education system. And that's the key. We need to prepare the students for their future, whether in college or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for keeping me honest here. I sometimes lose track of where I am. We now have 1 minute by each candidate. First speaker will be Ms. Torres-Ray.
Again, I want to thank the League for giving us this opportunity to connect with our constituents. It is so important, especially right now where we have limited opportunities to door knock and to engage in activities that connect us. So I really appreciate that you're giving us this moment. And also, I want to make a commitment to my district again to fully represent your voices and to be available to you in my office, not only to craft policy and to make sure that your voices are included, but also to solve many problems that you may have right now that our offices could be instrumental in solving. And thank you for the privilege for giving me the privilege to represent you. And I hope you can count on your support to continue to stay in office representing you.
Thank you. Ms. Greenman.
Sorry about that. 2020 is a make or break moment for our democracy, and it's going to take all of us voting. It's going to take all of us reminding our friends and our family and our coworkers, our neighbors, to vote and vote early. You know, this pandemic has upended all of our lives, and we need to ensure that we are coming together. One, to repair and reimagine our democracy, to invest in the things that are really important to the long-term success of every Minnesotan and every Minnesota kid. So I'd ask you, one, I'd love your support. You can check out my website at emmagreenman.com and then go make a plan to vote. If you haven't already voted, you have 26 days left, but vote early this year. Protect the health and safety of your neighbors, put on a mask, or return your absentee ballot. But now this is the moment to stand up and make your voice heard. And I just really appreciate all of you out there registering voters and turning out your friends and family. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for this debate.
Thank you. Ms. Knapper.
Thank you. I am really excited about this election. And again, I just want to be that fresh voice in the state capitol for my district. I did a little bit of research, and there hasn't been a Republican in this seat since at least 1976. And so what I think is really important is that we restore some semblance of balance in representation for Minneapolis at the state capitol. So again, you can look at my website, which is nappermn63.com. And again, I just want to be a fresh voice for you. I want to bring new ideas and think outside the box so that we can improve the lives of all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Thank you to the League and to all of the candidates and members. I really appreciate the discussion. And thank you to all of those who are watching and listening for participating in your democracy and voting. And if there are questions that you didn't get answered tonight, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to have a conversation. I'm missing door knocking this year, but I'm not doing so because of the pandemic. And so if you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. But the stakes are so high. And as your state representative, I will continue to fight for you and for our community. If you vote for me, you're going to get someone that's going to put science over fiction, compassion over fear, and progress over chaos. I'm all in for all of this, and I hope you're in too. And so if you are, please go vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Pafko.
The next legislature is going to have to make very tough decisions in order to balance the budget. We need to get the economy working again. We need to get Minnesota working again. The elderly, the vulnerable elderly need to take reasonable precautions. I'm a member of that group and I do that. But our young, productive workers that are out of work, that are underemployed, need to get back because they have virtually no chance of getting seriously ill from COVID-19. The legislature needs to overcome the budget deficit. We need to fully fund and support our police. We need to improve public safety. And we also have to solve the long-term education problem by providing education choice to our students with the state funds following the student rather than the school district. I've got the experience and the expertise to make these tough decisions, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Halverson-Wickland.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the League for hosting us tonight and for allowing us an opportunity to connect with voters. As has been mentioned, it's been difficult for us to get out in the ways that we are customarily out in the community and miss those ways, but we want to hear from you, and I hope that if there weren't our questions you still have, please reach out and get in touch, because I do want to be responsive and answer any of these questions. I'm running because I want to continue to serve the community of Richfield, and I believe that by working together on the solutions that we put together with residents, the community involved, that we can make a stronger state and we can get through the difficult health crisis that we're in and the economic recession we're in by working together to solve these complex problems. So please use your right to vote, and I hope I earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Response from our chair.
Yes, I just wanted to say on behalf of the League of Women Voters in Richfield, I want to thank you all for participating. You just demonstrated one of the tenets of our League of Women Voters, and that's to educate the voter. And I'm hoping that after all the viewings and everything, they're going to see this lively discussion, because I've really learned a lot and I really appreciate the input that we got. It really was a pleasure to meet you all and get to know those of you that I don't know very well. And so I will let you know that you'll get one more email from me, and it will have the list of the times when this will be shown on Channel 16 in Richfield, and also the links to the YouTube channels. So anyway, again, thank you and good night. This has been a great forum. I really appreciate it. Thank you.